looking for. These are droids you're 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 looking for. Report what they throw.
Welcome back to the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. This time I am the only droid on the pod. This is Mike, and we're talking about Chapter 6 of The Mandalorian, named The Prisoner. Sadly, the rest of the droids could not join because they have things like real lives and couldn't actually be a part of this episode. So I'll talk through a little bit of this in an abbreviated edition of the show, and then we'll get everybody back for a more in-depth discussion of what really was one of the best episodes of the run so far for The Mandalorian. No surprise, it again is directed by Rick Famuyiwa, who did episode 2, chapter 2, which was my favorite leading up to this one. Might still be my favorite, but I very impressed with not only the direction of this episode, the story. There was a lot of fun in the heist. It felt like one of those things we've always wanted to see as an outside the normal saga Star Wars story, because you knew these kind of things were going on with smugglers throughout the galaxy with bounty hunters, that this would be a story that they could convey, and it's been done in other formats, but yet really lends itself well to Star Wars. So this felt like a very natural episode to take place in the Star Wars universe, and as it unfolded, we got a lot of the great balance between the action, the comedy, a little bit of drama, and I really felt like this was balanced well by Rick Famuyiwa, and it really took things kind of back from what were maybe two episodes that didn't have a controversy surrounding them, but were maybe not as well received as some of the earlier episodes. This, I would imagine, would be a very well received episode, very entertaining overall. It does not hit on some of the things that we've been talking about among the podcast about moving the story forward, but now that we're into our third episode, it's beginning to bother me less and less. Yes, I want more about what's happening with Baby Yoda. Who is Baby Yoda? What does Baby Yoda mean? Where did Baby Yoda come from? Why does the remnants of the Empire want Baby Yoda? And more backstory on The Mandalorian. Now, this episode, we hinted at more backstory of The Mandalorian. The crew, mostly the Twi'lek, who was with him on the crew. I believe her name was Zen. And that kind of alluded to a former relationship between the two of them. It seemed like the other members of this crew knew him, at least the individual, I think Ran, who at the very beginning of the episode sets up the Mandalorian with this heist job with the rest of the crew. He knows him as well. So we know there's been some history of him working with other mercenaries, with other bounty hunters. He has not always been, obviously, sticking to the Bounty Hunters Guild. Maybe he had to make his way into the guild, like another character that we will no longer mention on this podcast in the previous week's episode. He's now at the point, though, where he needed to take on another job. We didn't get a reason why. He had moved on from Tatooine, but it seems like he's going to continue to find other work to keep him and Baby Yoda in the comforts they're accustomed to within the Razor Crest, which was needed for this mission. So this episode, overall, a lot to like about it. And I think some of the things I want to call out was, obviously, there was a great setup in the heist, just the need to go and retrieve this prisoner from a New Republic vessel. It a little bit played on what the Mandalorian had now no longer wanted to do, which was to take innocent lives. He was trying to avoid that. They mentioned that the ship was run entirely by droids, so that made things a little bit easier for him, until the unveil that there is one human aboard who's working for the Rebellion, who just happens to be Matt Lanter, also the character known as Devon, who's leading the Republic ship and may recognize his voice as Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars. A couple other faces that we saw that were a bit familiar that popped up throughout this episode, but I think that was just a nice little hint again, is that they're continuing to honor those people who've been a part of Star Wars for quite some time and maybe not the main Star Wars cinematic roles, but some of the things that have been meaningful to fans, and giving those actors a chance to continue to be a part of it was something special. But I think one of the interesting things, and probably a big takeaway from this, is that we continue to see the comedians who continue to see recognizable faces, recognizable voices. Bill Burr as Mayfeld, I quite enjoyed in this episode. I thought that he really held his own pretty well. Didn't take me out of it because he did seem like somebody who would very much be a mercenary. I don't know if Bill Burr could actually pull that off in real life, but he seemed to do it well in this episode. I know for Sam, he did text me on our overall General Droids text thread that he felt like he liked his Star Wars a little bit before they used these creative witticisms like wise ass. And, I get where Sam's coming from, but I've always felt like some of our word usage and some of our slang has found its way into Star Wars, especially in the form of Harrison Ford and what he did with Han Solo. So didn't feel totally out of place to me, but I think I get where Sam's coming from. That could be a little bit off-putting, especially if you know Bill Burr. You see his character come up and he's really just playing himself. Obviously not a mercenary in real life, but he didn't really stretch too far beyond that. But it felt like it was very warranted to have all the other mercenaries questioning his abilities as a gunfighter, as a overall warrior, because there's such this lore behind the Mandalorians about who they are and what they can do in battle that it felt like they all would have a bit of a chip on their shoulders to see whether or not all the stories were true, whether he was worthy of that moniker. He showed he was when he took down the group of droids relatively quickly into them getting on the ship. And I think as he obviously took the rest of them out throughout, it showed that he bested all of them. But I've been impressed that they haven't gone the dominant route of, he just does everything so well that no one is a match for him. Almost always, and even with the battle with the 4 droids that we saw, he was in a position of losing at times and needing to adjust. It wasn't a simple dominance and overwhelming control of the situation. He's always kind of on his heels and very much on his heels in parenting Baby Yoda, so it felt pretty natural that he'd have to find his way to fight through. But I kind of also like that the rest of them were watching as he did fight off the droids. They weren't going to step up and help him because clearly there's not a lot of love between mercenaries. But Bill Burr was Mayfeld. Clancy Brown, he may know from a bunch of different series. The first one that jumps to mind to me is he was in Lost, and he's played a number of small roles throughout cinema, throughout television. He was the sheriff in the Sleepy Hollow series that was good for maybe a season and a half before that took a wrong turn. And then Natalia Tena, who is the Twi'lek, Jian, is also from Harry Potter. She played Tonks. And my most pleasant surprise, and I felt like I kind of caught it right away, is that the droid Zero is Richard Ayoade. And Richard Ayoade, for those of you not familiar, is a phenomenal director. Directed a film called Submarine. He's played a lot of parts as well. He's in the IT crowd. He now hosts his own travel show. He's really a man of all seasons, a Renaissance man, and certainly an incredibly funny British comedian who made me consider that I think a rite of passage as time goes on is that if you are a quality British comedian going forward, and more so probably a quality in terms of writing and performing, not just say an over the top comedian who's like comedic actor who doesn't also bring the writing chops. And I think this has just really been made by the last couple of droids that have been in Star Wars. But L3, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, we got Richard Ayoade as Zero. I'm kind of feeling that, if you're holding your own salt as a British comedian, you're probably going to be a droid. It's going to be like Law and Order. If you're a New York actor, you've probably been on Law and Order at some point. And if you're not, you can't really call yourself a New York actor. So if you have not been a droid in the next 20 years, you're probably not a British comedian. And I wouldn't mind continuing to see more of Richard Ayoade as Zero. His nice back and forth with Baby Yoda on the ship was pleasant to watch. I kept on waiting for Baby Yoda to get the best of him and attack him and maybe just jump out of something onto the face of the droid. We did get another moment where the shot came in and we didn't know where it had come from. It was a shot from behind. But as Baby Yoda turns to look at his hand in disbelief, maybe breaking the fourth wall a little bit, because is a baby, even at 50 years old, going to make that kind of reaction? Who knows? But I chuckled, enjoyed it, felt like it was a pretty worthy choice on their part, and just always fun to have that with Baby Yoda. But sad to see the end of that droid. And obviously we saw IG-11 was played by Taika Waititi. Taika is not British, but certainly fit into the mold of comedian that I'm talking about. So very pleasantly surprised about all of the droid choices. I'm a huge Richard Ayoade fan, so I wouldn't mind seeing him somehow come back. That droid was special and pleasant to see. And then some of the other things that throughout this episode that really jumped out, more so I think that the heist, it kept my attention, kept the tension, whether or not he was going to get back in time to save Baby Yoda, because we had the entire interaction where Baby Yoda is unveiled within the ship, and so the rest of the team knows, about Baby Yoda. It was something that I felt allowed us to be concerned once again. And that's the thing that this show continues to do. It finds a way to get all of us worried about whether or not the Mandalorian is going to be able to protect Baby Yoda. And the moment that Baby Yoda falls when they jump out of hyperspace, I think everybody was ready to take out Bill Burr. And I would have to say that I think they do a really nice job of making us feel like he's in peril, and whether or not the Mandalorian can pull off another one to get back to him in time before someone takes him or kills him is a continually interesting, compelling thing to watch in this series. So as that all played out and he one by one took out all of the other members of his heist crew, very well shot, the strobing effect as he came up behind Bill Burr's character, Mayfeld, all wonderful, great moments that led to, really entertaining half hour of Star Wars television. And despite it not moving the story forward, I kind of, again, I'm starting to lean into that. I want more. I want to have those questions answered, but I feel like I'm getting, especially after this episode, if you can entertain me in this way, you can have a quality story and quality half hour, quality adventure. You keep these adventures going weekly. That's not going to be a problem for me. I think it was a little bit less so last week, where I felt like they made some choices that weren't great. And now, as we end up heading towards chapter 7 and 8, and we've moved on, we don't know. Fennec Shan, is Ming-Na's character actually dead? Is she not coming back? Are we not going to see any more Cara Dune? Is Gina Carano already moved on? Is this really the one-offs are going to continue? That might be something that bothers me more so, because I want to see more of these characters. Giancarlo Esposito, is he going to be only in one episode? He seemed like somebody who could be the big bad, but maybe we're going to get him in chapter 7 and 8, and it would be great if it led into more in the next season. But it's kind of interesting that that's the choices that they're making. And now, once again, that we settle in a little bit more to these weekly adventures, it's feeling a little bit better. And I still hope that as we come to the end of the season, we get to the point that we do learn a little bit more about Baby Yoda and where this all might be going. But we do want to hear from you. Tweet us, DroidsPod, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Droids Podcast on Facebook, droidspod@gmail.com. Send us an email. Let us know what you thought of the episode. Obviously, there were a couple other cameos that need mentioning, as the Mandalorian, the savvy gent that he is, taking the tracking device, taking the distress signal that was sent to the Republic back with him on the Razor Crest, leaving it on the Twi'lek that he was rescuing on the base of the rest of that crew, and then exiting as the X-Wings approached, who were piloted by the directors so far that we have seen in this series: Rick Famuyiwa, Dave Filoni, and of course Deborah Chow. They were the three pilots in the cockpits of the X-Wings that we saw, and I loved it. I thought it was a really nice moment. None of them were bad in the line readings that they had. I think Filoni had the most that he had to offer in there, and it was just, it felt familiar because we've seen Filoni so much that to see him in a cockpit, it just didn't take me out. It felt really fun that he was there. No surprise at all. Dave Filoni's character's name is Trapper Wolf. Yep, I respect it. The guy loves wolves. I would have thought maybe Loth Wolf would have gotten in there, but he gives himself a name that is right in line with what you would expect from Dave Filoni. Jib Dodger for Famuyiwa, and then Sash Ketter for Deborah Chow. But I think all of us have envisioned at some point wanting to be in the cockpit of an X-Wing. And if you are a director on this series and you get the chance, of course you're going to be in it. Why wouldn't you take that opportunity? I love that they did that. I thought that was a wonderful choice and really a lot of fun to watch that all play out. But another nice twist at the end of the episode for the Mandalorian to have pulled that off. But where do we go from here? We'll have to find out in the ensuing episode. Another nice moment between the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda. He gives him once again the top of the steering column that he needs to continue to help him, sustain some semblance of happiness for Baby Yoda, and it just continues to be a lot of great moments in there. And I feel like, we got some references. We got a reference to Canto Bight in this episode, as Bill Burr's character mentions that the ship, the Razor Crest, looks like it's a slot machine on Canto Bight. And I think we continue to see some elements of all over the Star Wars universe come into this. And I think when you have the depth of story that has been told over the course of 40 years, and now everything that has been added even recently, you can continue to have small winks that matter not at all to a general audience, but could mean the world to a diehard Star Wars fan. And that's exactly what they should be doing in this series. One of the ones that I thought was actually kind of really fun was, I believe it may not have actually been the same character, but Rio from Solo, an Armenian pilot voiced by Jon Favreau, of course, was one of the prisoners on the Republic ship. It was an Armenian, but we don't know if it was actually Rio, because we saw the four arms come up as it looked just outside and peeked its head out. And I thought that was a fun little nod, once again, for those of us who enjoyed Solo, unlike Sam. So they do a really nice job of continuing to reference those points. The design of this, the ship looked great. It kept me involved throughout, and I want to see more and more like this. And I think it has really been quite a surprise that they have done such a wonderful job with this series, even though there are limitations, there are things that we've been disappointed by. Week to week, it's a ton of fun, and it is a great Star Wars experience. And I'm excited to see what they do with these final 2 episodes, because we're likely going to start to see what this whole picture is going to be going forward. We'll likely continue to get these weekly missions, but we're going to start to get somewhere with that overall questions that have been nagging for a bit over the last few weeks. So that's pretty much going to do it here on my solo edition. As really the only solo, I think, defender on this podcast, seems pretty warranted that I would do a solo show at some point. But I'd like to, give a call out to my boy Zero, my new favorite droid in the Star Wars universe, who gone too soon. I think we could probably go through this entire series and talk about the characters that are gone too soon. IG-11 should come back. We could just do side stories. One of the great things about doing something like this, you do more Star Wars, you do individual series, you do these side movies, you find out what works, you find out what people like, and then you go and create more of it. Kind of like the Cassian Andor series we're going to see with him and K2SO and Alan Tudyk, Diego Luna. That worked, so why not do more of it? And it's very smart on the part of what they're doing with Lucasfilm and Disney, that they keep on finding this. Of course, check out our entire episode from this week, the longer edition, where Ryan and I talk about The Rise of Skywalker, the build-up, the issues with the press tour, what we're going to do over the weekend to get ready for the final film in the Skywalker saga. That is episode, I believe, 109, the one you would find just before this episode, so take a listen to that one as well. And I got to give a big tip of my cap to Rick Famuyiwa. I'm beginning to think, he's done the 2 best episodes, in my opinion, of The Mandalorian, but I really feel like he's an incredibly talented director, and I'm thrilled that he's gotten 2 episodes, and I can't wait to see what he continues to do next and what the series has in store for us going forward. So that will do it for this very brief edition of the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast. Let us know what you thought of The Mandalorian Chapter 6, The Prisoner. Email us at droidspod@gmail.com, and we will be back next week for the week of Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. We're going to talk endlessly about Star Wars. We do it on this podcast anyway, but next week it is going to be the only thing on our minds. Join us next week for the Droids You're Looking For, a Star Wars podcast.